Hello there, I'm Chris and I'm a volunteer at the Moors Valley Railway. I'm going to read you a story about this engine and it's called Tinkerbell Saves the Day. It's a story from this little railway in the big park. The little engine in this story is a real engine and was built a long time ago by Mr. Roger Marsh. He had a very small dog who was called Tinkerbell and he used this name for his new locomotive. It was the first of the many engines that you can see when you visit the Moors Valley Railway. Tinkerbell saves the day. Many years ago, a man whose hobby was building small railway engines wanted to build something very special. After months of planning and many hours of hard work, his new engine was finished. It was short, fat and dumpy and large enough for the driver to sit in. Yet it could still run on very narrow gauge rails. He named the new engine Tinkerbell. Over the next few years, he took Tinkerbell to many different railways and lots of people saw her. She worked very hard, pulling hundreds and hundreds of passengers. One day, a young man called Jim saw Tinkerbell. She was just what he wanted. He liked her so much that he persuaded her owner to sell her to him. Tinkerbell was very tired after her years of hard work, and many of her parts were worn out, so Jim decided to send her away to be repaired. He often went to see Tinkerbell in the workshop where she was being mended, together with the lots of other engines. Jim was so pleased with her that he bought her younger brother Talos as well. Now Jim had two engines, enough to start his very own railway. Jim had always wanted to start a railway of his own, and very soon Tinkerbell and Talos were hard at work helping Jim turn his new railway into the busy Moors Valley Railway that you can visit and ride on today. The two engines felt so happy as they busily took turns taking trainloads of rails and sleepers to Jim and his band of helpers who were building the track. At last the railway was finished, and Tinkerbell and Talos were hard at work all day long, carrying the hundreds of passengers who had come to see the new railway. The two engines happily exchanged whistles each time the trains passed, much to the delight of their passengers. As the railway got busier, Jim decided he needed to build a bigger and stronger engine, which could pull more carriages. The first of these new engines was called Sapper, and he looked splendid in his coat of shiny green paint. Sapper was very popular and soon became the main engine at Moors Valley Railway. As Sapper was so successful, Jim built more big engines, which meant that poor Tinkerbell was used less and less, of course. She was old and worn out and sat at the back of the engine shed, feeling cold, dusty, and very sad. There was talk of selling her, and even worse, of scrapping poor old Tinkerbell. The railway was as busy as ever, and Jim was driving a full train pulled by Sapper, the big green engine that could pull the heaviest trains. But today things were not right with the engine. No matter what Jim tried, Sapper was gradually losing steam pressure and getting weaker and weaker. Beyond the first tunnel, the line climbed steeply, and Sapper was by now struggling to reach the top of the hill. Slower and slower he went, until with a great sigh and in a big cloud of steam, he stopped. Sapper's main steam pipe had split. There was no way he could restart the heavy train. Jim raced to the nearby railway telephone and shouted instructions that another engine should be steamed up immediately and sent to the rescue. The driver who had taken Jim's instructions was new and did not know that Tinkerbell was not used anymore. Jim had arrived back at the engine shed and was horrified when he saw Tinkerbell with the first wisps of steam escaping from her safety valve. "I need one of the big engines, not Tinkerbell," he shouted at the poor driver, but there was no time to prepare another engine. Tinkerbell would have to do. Tinkerbell had heard what Jim had said and was afraid that she would be unable to pull the heavy train. If she failed, Jim would certainly get rid of her. However, as she chuffed along in the warm sunshine to reach the stranded train, the hot steam flowing through her cylinders made her feel stronger and stronger. Tinkerbell's confidence was coming back. Perhaps she could do it after all. As Tinkerbell approached the train and saw how long it was, her doubts returned. But the stranded passengers clapped loudly as she backed onto the waiting train. Tinkerbell could not let the passengers down. She had to do it for them, and she had to show Jim she could do it. Jim opened Tinkerbell's regulator gradually so that her wheels would not slip as she took up the heavy load. The regulator was now wide open, but still the train had not moved. Just as Jim was about to give up, Tinkerbell gave an enormous chuff, sending steam from her chimney high into the sky. The train was moving. Tinkerbell chuffed really hard as she took the train nearer and nearer to the top of the hill. At last, Tinkerbell and her train were over the top of the hill, and by now she had used up much of her steam in her boiler and felt quite breathless. At least she could coast downhill now while her boiler built up some steam pressure. Jim helped Tinkerbell all he could by building up her fire, but they both knew there was still a long way to go. Tinkerbell had recovered well, and her boiler was back at full pressure as she approached the next hill. This time she charged at the hill and chuffed over the top comfortably. People had now gathered by the line side to watch Tinkerbell, and they all waved as she passed. Tinkerbell was now enjoying herself, just like she used to, even though she was pulling the heaviest train she'd ever pulled in her life. Sapper had managed to limp back to the yard, leaving clouds of steam behind him. Tinkerbell gave him a cheery whistle, but Sapper didn't even have enough steam left to reply. Tinkerbell pulled triumphantly into the station and came to rest at the end of the platform. All the passengers gathered around to see the brave little engine that had worked so hard. Tinkerbell felt very proud as she simmered gently in the station, and because she had done so well, she was allowed to pull the trains for the rest of the day. As Jim locked the engine shed that night, he stopped before closing the door and spoke softly to Tinkerbell. "Well done, Tinkerbell. I was very proud of you today. I didn't think you could do it, but you proved me wrong. You'll always have a home here at the Moors Valley Railway." Tinkerbell was so happy and excited that she thought she would stay awake all night, but was so exhausted that she fell into a deep and contented sleep, even before Jim had closed the door. Now, come and take a ride on the South's longest fully signalled narrow gauge railway at Moors Valley Railway, which is near Ringwood in Hampshire. And if you want to buy this book and some of the others in the series, they're all available in Moors Valley Bookshop.